Will Surfer hails from the same orphanage as his childhood friend Elfaria. Despite his lack of magical talent, a rare deficiency at the prestigious Regardin Magical Academy, Will's determination and skill in close-quarters combat set him apart. Isolated due to his inability to use magic, Will has honed his physical abilities to an impressive degree. His sword strikes are powerful enough to fend off magical attacks, a testament to his relentless training and resilience. Standing at 168 centimeters, his 15-year-old Rizanth is equipped with a Moria silver sword, battle garb precisely crafted by Rosti, and a pair of promised goggles. Will's deepest dungeon floor reach is the 7th, showcasing his bravery and tenacity. Despite his struggles, he finds solace in simple pleasures like ice candy and has a strong aversion to medicinal Moria herbs. His first love, a girl he met in his early years, still holds a special place in his heart, driving him to pursue greatness and honor their shared dreams. Even though he can fend off magical attacks with his sword, he's still the only student at the academy who can trip over thin air and blame it on his anti-magic aura. The scene opens with a view of the prestigious Regardin Magical Academy, known for its high value on magical talent. The academic emphasis on magic and questioning the prospects for those without such talents. Will Surfer, a student lacking magical talent, finds himself deep underground on the 7th floor of a dungeon. Here, he battles a monster using only a sword. His inner thoughts reveal his determination to overcome his limitations by slaying monsters. The monster, utilizing its magic, attacks Will by hurling large stones conjured from the ground. Despite his lack of magic, Will's confidence in his abilities shines through. He deftly fends off the attack and quickly maneuvers towards the monster, sliding between its legs and delivering a decisive slash to its body. The monster collapses to the ground. From a nearby rock crevice, Kiki, Will's familiar companion, watches the fight intently, witnessing Will's triumph over his adversary. In the Regardin Magical Academy's classroom, Professor Edward Surface was teaching the basics of magic. A student confidently explained the process of channeling magic into Balka ore and Agni dust to create sulfur and catalyze a brilliant flame. Edward, satisfied with the explanation, affirmed the student's correctness. Scanning the room, Edward's attention landed on Will Surfort, who was absorbed in his notebook while Kiki lay beside him. Despite Edward calling his name multiple times, Will was lost in his thoughts until a louder call jolted him. With a stammering reply, Will acknowledged the summons and reluctantly approached the front of the class, aware of the mocking smiles from some of his peers. In front of the demonstration materials, Edward mockingly reminded Will of the simple practical exercise. Will, with his wand in hand, attempted to cast a spell, but nothing happened. The room fell silent before erupting in laughter, led by Cyan Ulster. Colette Lore, however, couldn't bring herself to join in the ridicule. Edward clapped his hands, demanding silence, and disparaged Will's inability to perform even basic magic. He labeled Will a mere book learner and dismissed him as beyond help. Cheyenne, seizing the opportunity, performed the spell effortlessly, igniting the demonstration material in a show of skill. Despite Edward's cool warning against unauthorized demonstrations, Cheyenne smugly apologized, insinuating that he was helping Will. Edward then used his own magic to extinguish the flames, turning them into crystal. He addressed the class, emphasizing the supremacy and authority of magic in their world. He stressed that at the academy, talent in magic was the sole measure of esteem, and those who couldn't perform magic, despite their theoretical knowledge, were unfit to be there. Will endured a humiliation in silence, a stark contrast to the jeers of his classmates, his dreams seemingly crushed in that moment. In the academy alley, Will stood next to a classroom door, sighing deeply, with Kiki by his side. Cheyenne approached with his gang, Gordon Barrett and Laryl Mars. Cheyenne taunted Will about his perceived ineptitude, mocking his recent dungeon venture and insinuating that Will's efforts were futile and embarrassing. Cheyenne's condescension was interrupted by Colette Lore, who defended Will with fierce loyalty, declaring his kindness and hard work superior to Cyan's. Cheyenne scoffed at her, dismissing Will's dreams of becoming a Magiavander as unattainable and urging him to leave the academy, echoing Professor Edwards' sentiments. Cheyenne and his gang left, leaving Colette and Will to walk together. Colette reassured Will not to let Cheyenne's words affect him. Criticizing Professor Edwards' behavior, Will accepted her support graciously but acknowledged his limitations with magic. He then lightened the mood by expressing his gratitude for her concern, calling her cute, which flustered Colette. Amidst their banter, Kiki's indifferent yawn and subsequent lounging underscored the playful tension between Will and Colette. Colette chastised Will for his compliments, suspecting him of insincerity, but Will clarified that he was merely speaking the truth. Caught off guard, Colette struggled to maintain her composure, silently reminding herself of her noble background. Noticing Will's gaze fixed on a tall building, she inquired about his thoughts. Will, with his cloak parted to reveal the goggles he carried, remarked on the beauty of the day. Colette agreed, appreciating the warm light and pondering whether Albus Vina, the Ice Maiden's wand, watched over them from the tower. Will confirmed, envisioning her sitting by a window looking their way. In the depths of an ancient dungeon, drawings on the wall depicted a long-forgotten era. There was a time when people were oblivious to the sky, trapped in perpetual darkness and terrorized by the celestial host. The scene shifted to the silhouettes of 5 wizards, their forms illuminated by a powerful spell. Together, they cast a brilliant light that pierced through the darkened sky, shattering the gloom and revealing a clear, radiant expanse. Below, the people watched in awe and joy, their tears of happiness flowing freely. These 5 wizards had risen against the invaders, sealing the sky and bringing peace to the world. This monumental achievement earned them the title of Magiavander, a designation passed down through the ages to the strongest of mages. It was a title that everyone aspired to at least once in their life, dreaming of the honor it bestowed. A flashback of Will's childhood, where he played with Elferia Albus. They spoke of the sun and moon, and Elferia described the real sky where these celestial bodies floated. She told tales of a beautiful sunset on the other side of the sky that turned everything a bright red. Elferia, reading from a storybook, marveled at the illustration of a person with a large sword, calling the sunset the loveliest thing in the world. With youthful exuberance, Elferia closed her book and suggested that if they reached the top of the tower as Magiavanders, they might see the sunset together. Will, filled with determination, promised to join her on this quest. They pledged to see the sunset together, sealing their bond with innocent childhood dreams. The scene then shifted to Elferia as an academy student, dancing around the tower with grace and confidence. They shared a promise acknowledging Elferia's genuine talent that propelled her to become the youngest ever to earn the Magiavander title. She ascended to the top of the tower, leaving behind the world below. As for Will, he was left in the shadow of her achievements. Lacking magical talent, he struggled even to be mediocre. Yet driven by the promise they made that day, he continued to strive towards his dream of standing beside her, refusing to give up despite the overwhelming odds. Elferia's departure left a void in Will's heart, his dreams seemingly slipping through his fingers like sand. In the office of Professor Werner Norgram at Regarden Magic Academy, Will found himself once again at the receiving end of a stern reprimand. The professor's voice boomed through the room, berating Will for his reckless behavior. Kiki, Will's faithful companion, lay on the floor unconcerned. The force of Werner's anger was so intense that it knocked Will to the floor beside Kiki. Werner's frustration stemmed from Will's unauthorized solo venture into the dungeon, particularly to the perilous 7th floor. His concern was palpable, warning Will that such actions could lead to his demise one day. In a tone of contrition, Will apologized, but his mind quickly shifted to his credits. Despite his anger, Werner acknowledged Will's efforts. He confirmed the defeat of an evil guard, awarding Will 2 credits. Will and Kiki celebrated this small victory enthusiastically. Werner, now seated at his desk, began writing in his ledger, his demeanor slightly softened. The professor questioned Will's unwavering ambition to become a Magiavander. Will, taken aback, defended his goal. Werner explained the immense challenges ahead, the necessity to advance to the upper institute requiring proficiency in writing, spellwork, and praxis, and the near impossibility of earning enough credits in spellwork for someone who couldn't use magic. Will acknowledged these difficulties but remained resolute, focusing on praxis and dungeon expeditions to gather credits. Werner sighed deeply, stressing the improbability of success through praxis alone, especially for a non-magic user like Will. Furthermore, Werner reminded Will of his recent exam failures and the urgent need to earn 4 credits by the week's end, a deadline only 2 days away. Panic set in for Will, who scrambled to his notebook in search of a solution, flipping through pages frantically for a suitable monster. Amid his search, Werner, adjusting his glasses, casually mentioned reports of a Baskerville on the 6th floor, hinting that defeating such a creature could help. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Will embraced Werner, who half-heartedly protested. Unbeknownst to them, Cheyenne had been eavesdropping outside the door. He overheard the mention of the Baskerville and saw it as an opportunity to eliminate Will, who he deemed a no-talent. With this information, Cheyenne silently plotted his next move against Will Surfort. On the 6th floor of the dungeon, Will ventured forth with his trusty companion, Kiki. Determined to earn 4 credits that night, Will reassured himself with past victories despite Kiki's evident hesitation. Sitting beside Kiki, Will implored him to accompany him, emphasizing his reliance on Kiki's keen sense of smell. With a resigned sigh, Kiki acquiesced. Meanwhile, Cyan, accompanied by his followers, Gordon and Lyril, navigated the dungeon's depths. Cheyenne dismissed any notion of incompetence within their academy and plotted to handle the monster before confronting a particular laggard, ensuring the latter's expulsion due to insufficient credits. Lyril's concern about their safety was met with Cyan's irritation, and after reaffirming his elite status, they pressed on. Suddenly, a gigantic monster appeared, launching a devastating attack that shattered the ground beneath Lyril and Gordon. As the dust settled, Cheyenne stood trembling in fear, helplessly watching his companions blown away. His scream echoed through the dungeon, reaching Will and Kiki. Recognizing the urgency, Will sprinted toward the source of the scream, realizing someone was under attack. Running atop the dungeon's watery floor with Kiki and Tao, he quickly assessed the situation. From a higher vantage point, Will observed Cheyenne futilely casting fire spells at the monstrous evil sentinel, which was immune to his attacks. Despite their history of animosity, Will knew he had to intervene. As the monster advanced on Cheyenne, ready to strike, memories of Elfaria's encouraging words filled Will's mind. He donned the goggles she had given him and resolved to act. In a blur of speed, Will intercepted the monster's attack with his sword, the clash of their powers sending a shockwave through the area. In a distant office, Edward informed Workner of Cheyenne's unauthorized dungeon venture. Reacting with urgency, Workner accessed a crystal ball to monitor the situation. They watched in astonishment as Will, displaying extraordinary agility and strength, battled the monster, evading its mighty attacks and delivering strategic blows. Even Edward, initially skeptical, began to grasp the extent of Will's unique abilities. Amid the fight, Will's strategic prowess shone through. He dodged the monster's attacks and countered with precision, ultimately seizing the monster's colossal sword. Using it, he neutralized the monster's shockwave blast and delivered a decisive strike that felled the beast. The ground quaked, and as the dust settled, Will approached a trembling Cheyenne. Rather than gratitude, Cheyenne's pride flared, rejecting the notion of needing Will's help. Back in the office, Edward stormed out, unable to reconcile Will's superiority despite his lack of magic. Workner, however, recognized Will's unparalleled warrior spirit. Later, in Workner's office, Will was awarded 10 credits for his valor. Elated, Will celebrated with Kiki. As he left, he paused at the Academy alley, gazing towards the tower where Elfaria resided. While she watched the Academy through a glass wall, their unspoken bond bridging the distance. 5 years earlier, at the age of 10, Will Surford found himself at the prestigious Regarden Magical Academy, an oddity among the students due to his inability to use any magic. This peculiarity sparked numerous conversations and speculations among the Academy's inhabitants. Whispers circulated, questioning how a boy without magical abilities had secured a place at such an esteemed institution. Some suggested he was merely a pawn to attract the prodigious Lady Elfaria to the school. Now that Elfaria had ascended to the rank of Magiavander, there were murmurs suggesting that Will had outlived his usefulness. In the headmaster's office, Cauldron Anu, the headmaster, had summoned Professor Worker Norgram and young Will. Demonstrating her own magical prowess, Cauldron cast a spell that caused a sword to unsheath itself and float towards Will. The blade stopped just in front of him, and as Will grasped the hilt, Cauldron conjured multiple magic circles around him. Without hesitation, Will swung his sword, shattering each circle with precise strikes. The display left Professor Worker shocked, stumbling to the floor in disbelief at the boy's remarkable swordsmanship. Cauldron's laughter filled the room, breaking the tension. She declared that Will would be allowed to continue his studies at the Academy, much to Worker's astonishment. Despite Worker's protests about Will's lack of magical ability, Cauldron found the situation intriguing, a sword aspiring to be a wand. Will, clutching his sword with renewed determination, sought confirmation. Cauldron responded affirmatively, but with a caveat: only unwavering diligence and an indomitable will would make his seemingly impossible dream attainable. Leaving the headmaster's office, Will and Worker departed, the sword left unsheathed on Cauldron's table. As they exited, Cauldron spoke softly to the sword, an air of apology in her tone. She pondered the unprecedented situation, a sword aiming to become a wand, and mused over how this extraordinary journey would unfold. In the present day, Professor Worker was instructing his class, with Will seated alongside his companion, Kiki. Worker explained the two principal methods for advancing to the Upper Institute, the highest center of learning at Mercedes College, where the Magiavander reigned. One could either create a new type of magic or earn at least 7,200 credits at the Academy. The latter was the more common route, but Worker emphasized that many students were in danger of not even graduating, much less advancing. As the lesson concluded, the worried faces of the students reflected their concern, with some even in tears. Worker announced that he would conduct thorough supplementary lessons to help them. After class, Will met Colette Laura in the school corridor. Colette remarked on the intensity of Worker's supplemental class, acknowledging that while Will had earned every possible writing credit, he still struggled with spell work. Will appreciated Worker's efforts, noting that most professors wouldn't bother with extra classes, especially Professor Edward. As they walked, they encountered Cheyenne and his gang, including Lyra Mars and Gordon Barrett. Lyra was boasting about Cheyenne's supposed defeat of an evil sentinel, a monster worth 10 credits. though Cheyenne remained silent. The students marveled at Cheyenne's feat, speculating that he might soon replace one of the top three. Cheyenne, however, was lost in thought, reflecting on the incident. As Will and Colette passed by, Cheyenne suddenly stood up, grabbed Will's collar, causing Will to drop his books. Cheyenne's anger was palpable, driven by disbelief that Will, who was deemed talentless, could have defeated the monster he couldn't handle. Colette intervened, questioning Cheyenne's actions, but he clenched his teeth and, unable to reconcile his frustration, stormed off with his gang. Will retrieved his scattered books, and Colette, concerned, asked if something had happened between him and Cheyenne. Will, downplaying the incident, simply replied that it was nothing much. Professor Edward Surfence was adamant as he confronted Headmistress Cauldron Anuv in her office, demanding Will Surfort's expulsion. Edward argued that the Academy had no place for a student who couldn't use magic, emphasizing that Will's ability to surpass magic with sheer warrior skills was unacceptable. Cauldron, ever composed, responded calmly. She acknowledged that Will was in his sixth and final year, suggesting that expelling him now would be unreasonable. She summoned a book containing student information with a spell. The book opened to Will's page, detailing his impressive academic performance despite his lack of magical ability. Cauldron highlighted Will's potential to become an artificer or healer, emphasizing the Academy's duty to produce learned scholars for the fated day. Edward countered that Will's ambition was not to be a scholar, but a Magiavander, which was the crux of the issue. Acknowledging this problem, Cauldron proposed a test for Will. She appointed Edward to personally administer the test, given his newfound understanding of Will's secret. She assured Edward that the test's content was entirely up to him and that if Will failed, the decision of his advancement or expulsion would rest with Edward. With a sinister grin, Edward left the office, while Cauldron, smiling to herself, pondered the outcome. She mused aloud about the upcoming test, confident that Edward, the Dark Viper image, would determine the truth about Will's potential. Will, Colette, and Kiki stood in front of Will's locker, a constant reminder of his inability to use magic. The lockers at the Academy required magic to lock and unlock, a task Will couldn't perform. As usual, he relied on Colette for help. After Colette unlocked the locker with a quick spell, Will placed his books inside. Apologizing for always needing her assistance, Colette reassured him it was no trouble at all. As he organized his books, Colette noticed the sword stored behind them, a reminder of his warrior skills. Despite his desire to carry the sword on campus, Will knew it was forbidden. If he returned to the dorms, his roommate Rusty often kept him from leaving. Colette locked the locker again, commenting on his friendship with Rusty. Will dismissed it as a regular friendship. They made their way to the study hall, where Will began writing about the Battle of Garzaranso's history. Colette sat beside him, trying to steer the conversation towards magic-related topics. However, Will's focus remained on the history he was studying, reciting details about the dwarves uprising against exploitation and harsh treatment. Colette, impressed by Will's writing skills, reminded him he didn't need to work so hard. Will explained his need to earn every possible credit to advance to the Upper Institute. He related to the dwarves' determination in the Battle of Garzaranso, finding inspiration in their resolve to never give up, even against the mightiest magic. As Will closed his history book, Colette noticed a lone white hair on his head. She insisted on pulling it out despite Will's protests. Their lighthearted banter was interrupted by Professor Edward Surfence, who appeared suddenly and demanded Will's presence in the spell hall immediately, alone. In the spell hall of Regarden Magical Academy, Will stood facing Professor Edward Surfence. Kiki, his familiar, hovered anxiously behind him. Edward, with a stern expression, addressed Will's continuous failures in spellwork and announced a supplemental lesson specifically for him. Edward cast a spell, summoning black fire that struck the floor beneath Will. The flames crackled ominously as Edward explained the terms of the lesson. Will's task was to land a single strike on Edward. Success would earn him 5 spellwork credits, but failure would result in expulsion from the Academy. The gravity of the situation left Will terrified, his mind racing with the consequences. Edward, unwavering, cast another spell. Black fire enveloped him and ignited the tip of his wand, emphasizing the seriousness of the challenge. He declared that those without talent should not even aspire to become Magiavander. A magic circle formed at the tip of Edward's wand, and another appeared beneath Will, the black fire encircling him, ready to strike at any moment. The test had begun, and Will's determination would be pushed to its limits. Worker made his way to the headmaster's office, responding to Cauldron's summons. Cauldron apologized for the inconvenience before explaining the reason for the meeting. She cast a spell, Claire Molda, which produced a large magic circle behind her. White smoke filled the circle, gradually clearing to reveal the scene of Will and Edward facing off in the spell hall. Worker was shocked by what he saw. He demanded an explanation, questioning why Edward was involved in testing Will. Cauldron explained that Edward was conducting a test to determine if Will was worthy of attempting to become a Mangiavander. She emphasized that while she acknowledged Worker's support for Will, she also had to respect Edward's concerns. Worker protested, pointing out Edward's near Mangiavander status and the cruelty of the situation. Meanwhile, in the spell hall, Edward summoned a large magic circle above him, launching black fire at Will, who desperately dodged the attacks. Edward cast another spell, Dax Darbicans, a low-level dark magic spell with immense power. Will, recognizing the spell, was astonished by Edward's strength. Will attempted to create space between himself and Edward, circling him and waiting for an opening. He launched himself at Edward, aiming a kick from behind, but Edward's defense spell, Darge, blocked the attack effortlessly. Will was thrown back by a blaze of black fire, his glasses shattered and blood trickled from his mouth. Kiki, caught in the attack's impact, was injured and staggered away. Edward's prowess was overwhelming. He cast spells without incantations, his offense and defense impenetrable. Will realized he couldn't even scratch Edward. Edward mocked him, stating that he would only use two types of magic, his black flames and his shield. He cited a magical doctrine, urging Will to master a single magic as if it were 1,000 arrows. A series of magic circles appeared around Edward, signaling a barrage of Dax Darbicans. Will ran, trying to flank Edward, but the relentless black fire caught him and threw him high into the air. Will despaired, recognizing the insurmountable gap between himself and a top-tier mage like Edward. He longed for his sword, knowing it was his only hope. Colette was anxiously waiting at the locker area, worrying about Will's solo supplemental lesson with Professor Edward. Her mind raced with wild, unsettling scenarios of what might be happening to him. Her thoughts were interrupted when she noticed Kiki, injured, struggling to reach Will's locker. Kiki's attempt to open the locker with his feet signaled to Colette that something was terribly wrong. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Colette cast a spell to unlock Will's locker and rushed to the spell hall. In the spell hall, Will lay on the floor, surrounded by fire. Edward loomed over him, explaining the power dynamics of their world, where a single mage could annihilate 10,000 warriors with a wave of a wand. He stomped on Will, emphasizing that a sword could never surpass a wand and urging Will to abandon his aspirations. Despite the overwhelming odds and Edward's relentless attacks, Will struggled to his feet. He declared his determination to reach the Mangiavander, driven by his promise to Elfie and his desire to be with her. Edward, dismissive and enraged, launched another assault, enveloping Will in black fire. Just then, Colette burst into the room, carrying Will's sword. She threw it to him, and with a smile of gratitude, Will caught it, unsheathed it, and took his stance, now wearing his promised goggles. Edward, furious, cast a barrage of black fire. This time, Will did not evade. Instead, he sliced through the fire with his Moria silver sword, much to Edward's shock. The black flames surrounded Will like a wall, but he launched himself forward, cutting through the fire. Edward intensified his attacks, but Will deflected them, encircling Edward and looking for an opening. Drawing inspiration from the Battle of Garzaranso, Will remembered the bravery of the dwarf general Gareth, who, despite losing all of his comrades, managed to land a single blow that earned the dwarf's status. Using debris as a distraction, Will launched himself at Edward, breaking through the barrage of black fire and Edward's magical shield. With a powerful strike, he stopped his sword just short of Edward's face, leaving a small cut on his cheek. Edward acknowledged Will's victory and awarded him 5 credits before leaving the room. Exhausted, Will fainted into Colette's arms. The scene shifted back to the headmaster's office, where Cauldron and Worker watched the fight unfold through the magical projection. Cauldron observed the fight with keen interest, impressed by Will's determination and skill. Worker marveled at Will's tactical decision to dive into the barrage of attacks, using the chaos to his advantage. He noted how Will had cleverly hidden himself before launching an unexpected strike from a blind spot overhead. This maneuver showcased not only Will's bravery, but also his strategic thinking in the heat of battle. Cauldron acknowledged Will's impressive feat of breaking through Edward's formidable shield with a powerful slashing attack. It was a testament to Will's ability to overcome magic with sheer force and precision. Cauldron recognized the significance of this moment, seeing in Will a resilience and determination that set him apart. Together, Cauldron and Worker reflected on the remarkable display of courage and skill they had just witnessed, understanding that Will's undaunted spirit was what truly made him extraordinary. This is the end of Wistoria Wand and Sword Episode 2. Thank you so much for staying in this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest contents. See you in the next video.